guys, Financial Dan here. When I first started focusing on dividend investing, I found that, especially as a Canadian investor like myself, the tools for keeping track of a dividend-based portfolio are very sparse. Sure, there's a lot of great tools out there when it comes to keeping track of day-to-day stock prices, but when it comes down to keeping track of your overall dividend portfolio, the options seem limited at best. That's why I ended up creating this Google Spreadsheet that'll help you to keep track of your overall dividend portfolio in both US and Canadian markets. While this sheet is geared towards Canadians, American investors, or in fact anyone investing in US or Canadian markets, can use this sheet as well. Just keep in mind that a lot of the final output data will be in Canadian dollars. Now, if as an American investor, you think this sheet would be useful for you if it were to output in US dollars, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it. And based on your response, I can definitely look at making a US version of the spreadsheet as well. If you'd like a copy of the sheet for yourself, I've provided a link down in the description below, and that'll take you to my Patreon page where it's available to all subscribers. If you're not ready to be a Patreon subscriber and you still want a copy, just sign up, grab a copy for yourself, and feel free to unsubscribe at that point. Before diving into the spreadsheet, I just want to remind you to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you can be notified whenever I post new content. All right, let's take a look at that spreadsheet. I just want to start out by showing you a very zoomed out view of the spreadsheet so that you can get a general idea of its layout and where everything's located. The spreadsheet's essentially broken into 3 sections. So up here at the top, you'll find your Canadian stock section. That's under this red bar and it's highlighted in yellow. And that's where you're gonna enter in and keep track of all your Canadian stocks. So anything purchased on the Toronto Stock Exchange or the TSX Venture would go in this section here. Below that is the US stock section. That's under this blue bar and it's highlighted in green. And that's where you'll keep track of and enter in anything that you purchased on, say, the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange or any other US exchange. Now down at the bottom, you'll find your portfolio totals, and that'll just sum up your spreadsheet in a number of different ways. So you'll find the market value of your portfolio in both Canadian and US dollars down here. You'll also find your overall portfolio's dividend yield, and your annual dividends for your entire portfolio will be listed down here as well. And then you'll also get your compounding annual growth rate of all your dividends over the past 1, 3, 5, and 10 years. And then below that, you'll get a number of charts indicating your upcoming pay dates listed in order by date, and then the stock that it's attributed to and how much you can expect to make on that date. Then there's a couple of charts here that'll give you your portfolio allocation as well as your income allocation by whatever sector or industry you've indicated on each individual stock. And then there's a chart that'll attempt to estimate your future annual dividends year over year for the next 25 years. And it just uses a number of different variables in your spreadsheet, such as your overall dividend yield and your compounding annual growth rate of your dividends. And then you can enter in a couple of variables as well, such as if you're making any biweekly contributions or your estimate for the inflation rate. Now, before we dive into the spreadsheet and go over how it works, I just want to go over which cells are fillable by you. So what I've gone and done is I've highlighted in a slightly darker color and also put a dotted border next to any cells that need to be filled out by you or can be filled out by you. So as you can see on the Canadian side of the spreadsheet, there's 13 columns that contain cells that can be filled out by you. And on the US side of the spreadsheet, there's only 12 columns that contain cells that can be filled out by you. And the reason why there's one more on the Canadian side of the spreadsheet just comes down to how the different web sources that the spreadsheet references, how they display and reference stock ticker symbols. So with Canadian stock ticker symbols, each web source will reference them in a slightly different way, whereas the US stock tickers are referenced in the exact same way for each web source. And that's why you just need to enter in 2 different formats for stock ticker symbols in the Canadian side of the spreadsheet. We'll go over that in just a sec. Now let's just dive into the spreadsheet. And as you can see, columns B and C are where you'd enter in the stock ticker data on the Canadian side of the spreadsheet. On the US side of the spreadsheet, you'd only be entering in data on column B. So column B references Google Finance. The way that Google Finance wants to see a stock ticker for Canadian stocks would be the exchange, the abbreviation for the exchange, so TSE, and then semicolon, and then the ticker symbol. So for Bank of Montreal, it would be TSE semicolon BMO. If you were entering in a stock that was listed on the Venture Exchange, you'd enter CVE instead of TSE. And you can see up at the top, I've provided a little bit of a cheat sheet that'll give you a general breakdown of how different stock tickers are entered in on the Canadian side of the spreadsheet. The only exception to this rule would be for a REIT or a real estate investment trust. Regardless of which exchange that it's traded on, it would just be entered in like normal. So for RioCan, for example, you'd enter it in as REI.UN, just like how you'd normally see a Canadian REIT listed. So for the Yahoo ticker symbol, what this column wants to see is the stock ticker, and then a dot, and then the exchange that it's traded on. So for Bank of Montreal, again, it would be BMO.TO because it's listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange. If it was listed on the Venture Exchange, it would be .V. And again, you can see up at the top, there's another cheat sheet on this column that'll just give you a breakdown of each different format that you'd be entering in a stock ticker on the Canadian side of the spreadsheet. Again, the only exception to this rule is for a REIT. And the way that a REIT needs to be entered in is, let's use RioCan again as an example, but RioCan would be entered in as REI-UN. Instead of putting a dot, you'd put a dash, and then you just need to indicate the exchange that it's traded on, so .TO. If the REIT is traded on the Venture Exchange, it would be .V. So what I want to go and do now is I just purchased 100 shares of ATCO, and I've been waiting to enter it into the spreadsheet so that I can go through and show you how you would go and enter in one of your stocks. So ATCO is listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, which means on the Google ticker field, we would enter in TSE semicolon. And then their non-voting shares are listed as ACO.X. So we'll just hit enter now. And as you can see, the spreadsheet's already starting to populate itself automatically. So we'll just move over to the Yahoo ticker field now. And we'll enter in again ACO.X, because that's the ticker symbol for ATCO. And then since it's listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, we'll enter in .TO. Now, one thing I do want to mention that I forgot to mention before is that the ticker symbol on the Yahoo ticker field is case sensitive. So you need to make sure that it's in all caps or it will not work and some parts of your spreadsheet won't populate properly. Another thing that I want to mention is this .to will make your spreadsheet think that you're trying to hyperlink something. That's completely fine to leave, but what I like to do is just right click there and remove link, and that'll make the hyperlink go away. So we'll move over to the number of shares field and enter in 100 there. And then as you can see, the spreadsheet will give you the previous share price, the current share price, and your change over the course of the trading day. And then the last 365 days, this field will just give you a spark line of the general movement of the stock price over the last year. If the spark line is green, it just means that the current stock price is more than it was a year ago. And if it's red, it just means that the current stock price is less than it was a year ago. Now, sector and industry, what this column is for is those pie charts down at the bottom of the spreadsheet. they'll use this information to give you different income and portfolio allocation information based on sector and industry. So since ATCO is a utilities company, it's going to enter in utilities. The next two columns will just give you the market value of each individual holding in both Canadian and US dollars. And then after that, you'll find the portfolio allocation column, which will just break down your holdings as a percentage of your total portfolio. Now, a couple of things that I want to mention about that is that it does take cash into account. And so if we just scroll left here and then scroll down, you'll find the Canadian cash field, which is where you can enter in any Canadian cash that you're holding onto. And then if we scroll down a little more, you'll find the US cash field where you can enter in any US cash that you're holding onto. The other thing that I want to mention about the portfolio allocation column is that I personally don't like to hold more than 5% of my portfolio in any given holding. Some people might disagree with that, and that's completely fine. But what I've done is I've made it so that if any one of these holdings goes above 4.5%, the field will turn from green to yellow. And if it goes above 5.5%, it'll turn red, just indicating that you might want to consider rebalancing your portfolio. But again, that's completely up to you. Next, we'll find a number of metrics and ratios such as earnings per share, price to earnings, diluted price to earnings, price to book, and debt to equity. And then we'll find the next three fillable cells. So withholding taxes on dividends, what that is for is Canadians are subject to a 15% withholding tax on any US dividends. And so if we scroll down to the US side of the spreadsheet, you can see a number of my US holdings are indicated at 15% withholding tax. And I've also put an extra 0.5% just to make up for some of the conversion fees when the dividends are being converted from US dollars into Canadian dollars before entering my account. So this column is just so that you can enter in any sort of deductions that your dividends might be subject to. And that'll give you more accurate net dividend data in various places on the spreadsheet. So for ATCO, we'll just enter in 0% right there. And then the next column is distributions per year. Now, what that means is how many times is the dividend paid each year? Is it paid quarterly? Is it paid monthly? So ATCO pays its dividend quarterly, so that means it's paid 4 times per year. As you can see, RioCan pays its dividend monthly, and so we'd enter 12. If it's paid annually, you'd enter 1. Semi-annually, you'd enter 2, etc., etc. Now, if you're not sure for whatever reason how often a dividend is paid, one way you can find out is you can go to the Morningstar website and look up the stock. So I have ATCO open already right here. And if you just go to the dividend page and scroll down, you can just open up these tabs and you can see that it's paid 4 times per year. So let's go back to the spreadsheet. And the next column is manual annual dividend, and that's where you're going to enter in the indicated annual dividend for each one of your holdings. And the reason why you need to enter it in manually is because it's going to compare that number to the automatically pulled indicated annual dividend. And that way it can flag you if there's been a dividend increase or decrease. So as you can see, CN Rail recently changed their dividend. And so it's flagging green, meaning that the dividend has increased from $2.30 to $2.46 per share. But if CN Rail, for example, if their dividend happened to be $2.50, then it would highlight red, indicating there'd been a pay cut. And the way to clear that field is you just enter in the new dividend amount. So $2.46, and you can see the flag is cleared. So ATCO actually has a bit of a weird dividend. And so as you can see, the indicated dividend that's automatically pulled is $1.79. So if we enter in $1.79, there's still a flag there, and the reason for that is because if you look under the auto distribution amount, this is just how much is paid each time a dividend is paid, and it's 0.4483, and of course it's paid 4 times a year. So if we just open up a calculator here and multiply 0.4483, which you can find this information on the Morningstar website that we just went to, but since it's here, we'll go 0.4483 and multiply it by 4 distributions per year. You can see that it's actually $1.7932.32. So what we're going to want to do is enter that in right here. So 1.7932, and of course that'll clear the flag. One other thing I want to mention about this column is some Canadian companies pay their dividends in US dollars. And a great example of this is Magna. And this was messing me up for a while, and I finally figured out what was going on. Magna, this company right here, is a Canadian company, and since they do a lot of business in the United States, they pay their dividends in US dollars. And what'll happen is if you enter it in on the Canadian side of the spreadsheet as though you purchased it on the Toronto Stock Exchange, you'll start to get flags as the exchange rate goes up and down. And so how I solved that problem is I just put my shares on the US side of the spreadsheet as though I purchased them on the New York Stock Exchange, and I haven't had any more problems since. It'll end up filtering down through the spreadsheet in the exact same way, and then you won't have to keep changing your dividend amount as the currency exchange rate changes. Next, we'll just go over real quick the gross income fields. So you'll find your dividend yield right here, and then you'll find your annual gross income. So how much are you making in the native currency each and every year, given how many stocks you own? So on the US side of the spreadsheet, this will be in US dollars. On the Canadian side of the spreadsheet, it'll be in Canadian dollars. And then each and every distribution as well, each time the dividend is paid. Now, this does not take into account any sort of withholding tax, which is where the net income data comes in. The net dividend yield is the dividend yield after taking into account any sort of withholding tax that's been deducted. And then the next two fields, annual net income and net distribution, is always going to be in Canadian dollars, regardless of whether it's on the US or Canadian side of the spreadsheet. It's automatically converted into Canadian dollars, and it also deducts any sort of withholding tax. So this is what you're going to be seeing after it's converted into Canadian dollars and any withholding tax is deducted given today's current exchange rate. Next is your contribution towards net income column, and that just breaks down what each one of your stocks is contributing to your total net income as a percentage. After that, you'll find your upcoming distribution dates, so which days you can expect to be paid, and then your ex-dividend dates as well, and those will automatically populate. And then the next fillable column right here, you can pretty much put whatever you want in here. There are no formulas in the spreadsheet that reference this. I just wanted to keep track of when different companies generally increase their dividends. So that's what I put in here, but you can put whatever you want, or you can choose not to fill it at all. The next group of cells will just give you the dividend CAGR, or the compounding annual growth rate of your dividends for each individual holding. And how that works is they reference these cells over here that are just on the other side of this column that indicates your payout ratio. But these fillable cells, they're actually fairly important. And that's why I've put a column where you can indicate the date that you've updated each one of these cells. And what'll happen is if you haven't updated it in over a year, it'll go red, telling you that you should probably update your dividend information, your historical dividend information for that stock. So what we'll go and do is for ATCO, if we go back to Morningstar, we can see that the historical dividends, right now, the dividend is $1.79, but the historical dividends for the last 10 years are indicated just to the left of that. And so what we want is the indicated dividend for 1, 3, 5, and 10 years prior. So we can just grab that. In 2020, it was $1.74. 2018 was $1.51. 2016 was $1.14. And then we can scroll over to 2011 and see that that's 57 cents. And so we can just jump back to the spreadsheet and start filling those in. So we'll just enter today's date in. So it's February 11th today. And then we can enter in 1 year prior. So 1 year ago, the dividend was $1.74. And then 3 years prior, it was $1.51. And then 5 years prior was $1.14. And 10 years prior was 57 cents. And then you can see over in the CAGR information, the dividend CAGR information, these boxes have now been filled, and that'll just tell you the average annual compounding growth rate of the dividend for each given amount of time. Lastly, you'll just find a number of columns indicating earnings per share, trailing 12 months earnings per share, both current as well as historical, so 1, 3, 5, and 10 years prior. Now that we're done going over how to fill out the spreadsheet and how to keep track of your individual stocks, I just want to show you one more thing, and then we'll jump down to the portfolio totals section of the spreadsheet. So the spreadsheet will give you a couple of indexes, the TSX Composite Index, as well as the S&P 500 Index, and that's just to help you keep track of how your portfolio is doing day by day versus those couple of benchmarks. Now, the portfolio totals section. So down here, like we were talking about at the beginning of the video, there's this chart that'll give you your upcoming pay dates, and it'll break it down by security, like which stock those pay dates are attributed to. And then it'll tell you your net income. So that's in Canadian dollars, and that's after all deductions that you've indicated in that withholding tax field. Up here, it'll tell you your previous day's market value of your portfolio. Now, I want to mention that there's 2 rows here. There's invested capital only, as well as total portfolio, which will take into account any cash holdings. So it'll give you your previous day's market value, as well as your current day's market value and the change in market value. And this is what you can compare to these benchmarks that I was just showing you. Now, next to that, you'll find the value of your portfolio in both Canadian and US dollars. So this field will be the same as this one over here. Moving back down, you'll find the portfolio allocation chart. So this is what references those sector/industry fields that you filled out up at the top of the spreadsheet, and it'll group them together and give you your portfolio allocation by sector or industry, and it'll also tell you your cash holdings as well. And then there's also your income by industry or sector, which is broken down right here. Next, we'll scroll back up and we'll take a look at the portfolio's net dividend yield. So on the left here, this one takes into account any cash that you're holding in the portfolio. And then the one on the right will give you your yield on invested capital only. And then to the right of that, you'll find your annual gross dividends and then your annual net dividends. So this is before any withholding taxes are taken off. And then this is after any withholding tax. And keep in mind that both of these numbers will be in Canadian dollars. Also, if we move a little farther to the right, you'll see there's a couple of fields up here that'll indicate your total annual withholding taxes being paid, as well as the percentage of your gross income that's being paid in withholding taxes and deductions. Below the annual dividend fields, you'll find a chart indicating a number of different ways of averaging out your annual net dividends, such as how many seconds it takes on average to make 1 cent, as well as your average hourly, daily, weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly income. Keep in mind that these numbers are averages of your annual income though, and not exact numbers to be taken literally. There's also a couple of fields that'll tell you what your annual dividend income would be if it were broken down and converted into an hourly rate at a full-time 40-hour-a-week job. The first field here will give you the hourly net income, and then the one below it will attempt to estimate the gross hourly equivalent before typical income tax deductions. I've set it at 22% effective income tax rate. And so keep in mind that the number could vary widely depending on the region that you're in and your personal income tax bracket. The last chart to the right uses your portfolio's dividend yield, net income, and the average weighted compounding annual growth rate of your total dividends, and it uses those figures in order to try and estimate your future dividend income. It'll give you a few different variables, such as if you're withdrawing your dividends from your account, reinvesting your dividends, or even continuing to contribute to your account. And you can edit your biweekly contribution amount right here and see how different levels will affect your future income given your current portfolio weighting. Beside that, you'll see another editable cell, which will just allow you to indicate what you think the average inflation rate will be. And that'll give you a duplicate readout of those same three scenarios, but with inflation factored in. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that the bi-weekly contribution amount will not increase based on your predicted inflation rate. And so the sheet will assume that whatever contribution amount you've indicated will be your contribution amount until the end of time, regardless of the inflation rate. Another thing to keep in mind about this chart is that it is just an estimate based on your current holdings, their weighting in your portfolio, and their historical performance. So these numbers could be very different based on a number of different variables that can't be seen. So just keep that in mind. So that's the entire spreadsheet. The last thing that I want to show you is that there is a help and instructions tab down at the bottom of the page. I've tried to cover everything in this tutorial video, but if you're not sure about something and don't want to sift through the video to find the answers, you'll likely be able to find the answers in this section here. Well, I hope you found this video helpful and that this spreadsheet is something that you can add to your list of investing tools. Thanks so much for sticking out until now. I really appreciate it, and I know this was a bit of a longer video. Again, if you want a copy for yourself, just follow the link in the description below, and that'll take you to my Patreon page where it's available to all subscribers. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you can be notified whenever I release new content. All right, thanks guys. See you next time.